When words failed the galaxy. The silent crisis. Before we start, drop a comment below and let me know you're here. Your support helps this channel reach more sci-fi fans like you. Now, let's begin. Dr. Sarah Chin stared at the holographic display showing 17 different alien languages, none of which made any sense. She was a linguist, one of Earth's best, but right now she felt completely useless. Around her, the Galactic Translation Bureau buzzed with panic. Dozens of species tried to communicate, and none of them could understand each other anymore. It started 3 days ago, said Administrator Vexlar, a tall alien whose skin shifted colors with emotion. Right now, he was a sickly yellow that Sarah had learned meant fear. The Universal Translator Network just stopped working. Not all at once. It degraded. First, it started making small mistakes. Then bigger ones. Now it's completely offline. Sarah walked through the chaos. A Krovan diplomat was shouting at a Tessari merchant, both using their own languages, neither understanding the other. Fights were breaking out. Deals were collapsing. The careful diplomatic balance that held the galaxy together was falling apart because nobody could talk to each other anymore. The Universal Translator. The Universal Translator wasn't a single device. It was a network, built thousands of years ago by a species called the Ancients. Nobody knew exactly how it worked. It had always just worked, allowing every species in the galaxy to understand every other species instantly. Languages were translated in real time, directly in the mind. You heard your own language, they heard theirs, and meaning flowed perfectly between you. Until it didn't. Can't you fix it? Sarah asked Vexlar. The administrator's colors darkened to frustrated purple. We don't know how it works. The ancients built it before they disappeared. We've been using it for millennia, but we never learned the underlying principles. We just relied on it. Sarah felt a chill. The entire galactic civilization was built on technology they didn't understand. And now that technology was failing. What happens if you can't fix it? Chaos, Vexlar said simply. Trade stops. Diplomacy ends. Species retreat to their own worlds. Everything we've built together collapses because we can't talk to each other. The human approach. Sarah spent the next 2 days observing the problem. While alien technicians tried to repair hardware they didn't understand, she did something different. She watched. She listened. She paid attention to how people tried to communicate when the translators failed. A Vrun engineer and a human technician were trying to work together on a repair. Without the translator, they couldn't share technical terms. But Sarah noticed something. They were using hand gestures. Drawing pictures. Finding ways to communicate despite the language barrier. It was crude. It was inefficient. But it worked. Administrator, Sarah said, finding Vexlar in his office. I have an idea. It's going to sound crazy. Vexlar's colors shifted to cautious orange. Crazy is better than nothing. What is it? What if we don't fix the translator network? What if we teach people how to communicate without it? Vexlar stared at her. That's impossible. There are thousands of languages in the galaxy. How can anyone learn them all? They don't have to, Sarah explained. On Earth, we had the same problem. Hundreds of languages, thousands of dialects. We developed something called a lingua franca. A common language that different groups could use to communicate. We also developed translation methods. Interpreters. Written dictionaries. Sign language. All sorts of ways to bridge language gaps without relying on magic technology. That would take years. Decades, even. For full implementation, yes, Sarah agreed. But we can start with basics. Emergency communication protocols. Common words for essential concepts. Visual symbols that transcend language. It won't be perfect, but it'll keep civilization from collapsing while you work on fixing the translator network. Vexlar's colors shifted through several shades before settling on thoughtful blue. Show me. Building bridges. Sarah started with the basics. She gathered representatives from 20 different species and began teaching them a simplified communication system. It drew on principles from human sign language, international symbols, and basic vocabulary that could be learned quickly. It was hard. Some species communicated through scent. Others through color changes. A few used sound frequencies humans couldn't even hear. But Sarah found common ground. Visual symbols that everyone could see. Simple gestures that most species could replicate. Basic concepts that all intelligent beings needed to express: yes, no, help, danger, food, water, peace, trade. The alien representatives were frustrated at first. They were used to instant, perfect communication. This new system was slow, clumsy, full of misunderstandings. But slowly, breakthrough by breakthrough, they started to get it. Adrelian, whose species communicated through electromagnetic pulses, learned to use a tablet to convert their thoughts to visual symbols. A whisper, whose language was too quiet for most species to hear, found that human sign language worked perfectly for them. A Krovan diplomat discovered that drawing pictures could convey concepts their words couldn't. It's working, Vexlar said, watching a group of formerly hostile species successfully negotiate a trade agreement using Sarah's system. It's crude, but it's working. Because it's human, Sarah said. We grew up without universal translators. We had to learn how to communicate across barriers. We made mistakes. We misunderstood each other constantly. But we kept trying, and we developed tools and techniques to bridge those gaps. The revelation. 2 weeks into the project, Sarah made a discovery. She was reviewing historical records of the translator network, trying to understand how it worked, when she noticed something strange. The network wasn't failing randomly. It was degrading in a specific pattern. It's dying, she told Vexlar. The translator network. It's not broken. It's dying of old age. That's impossible, Vexlar said. It's lasted for thousands of years. And now it's reaching the end of its lifespan, Sarah explained, pulling up data. Look at the degradation pattern. It's like a living thing slowly failing. And I think I know why nobody's been able to fix it. Why? Because the ancients didn't build a machine. They built something biological. Or maybe something that's both biological and technological. That's why your engineers can't repair it. They're treating it like hardware when it's actually more like an organism. Vexlar's colors went through an entire rainbow of emotions. If you're right, then we can't fix it. We'd need to rebuild it from scratch, and we don't know how. No, Sarah said. We can't rebuild it. But maybe we don't need to. The choice. Sarah called a meeting of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 100 species gathered, using the emergency communication system she'd developed. It was slow, sometimes frustrating, but everyone could participate. The translator network is dying, Sarah announced. We can't fix it. Within a year, maybe 2, it will fail completely. The council erupted in panic. Sarah waited for the chaos to settle before continuing. But I don't think that's a catastrophe. I think it's an opportunity. She displayed data on the screens. The translator network made us lazy. We stopped learning each other's languages. We stopped trying to understand each other's cultures. We relied on perfect communication without realizing that perfect communication can be a crutch. A Tessari counselor gestured in the sign language Sarah had taught them. What do you propose? We learn to communicate again, Sarah said. Not perfectly. Not instantly. But honestly. We teach our young to learn other species' languages. We train interpreters. We develop better systems than the one I've created, systems that respect and preserve the uniqueness of each language while still allowing us to talk to each other. That will take generations, another counselor protested. Yes, Sarah agreed. But those generations will understand each other better than we ever did with the translators. Because they'll have to work for it. They'll have to learn. And in learning each other's languages, they'll learn each other's hearts. She paused, letting that sink in. The ancients gave us a gift when they built the translator network. It let us build this galactic civilization. But maybe they always knew it wouldn't last forever. Maybe they knew that eventually, we'd need to learn to communicate on our own. Not as a convenience, but as a choice. As an act of reaching across the void between species and saying, I want to understand you. The vote. The vote was close. Many species wanted to keep searching for a way to repair or replace the translator network. But enough agreed with Sarah's vision that the motion passed. The Galactic Council would invest in language education, interpreter training, and communication systems that didn't rely on ancient technology. Vexlar found Sarah after the meeting. His colors were a warm gold she'd learned meant gratitude. You've changed everything, he said through a student interpreter, practicing the new system. But I have a question. Why? Why did humans develop all these ways to communicate across language barriers? Sarah smiled. Because we had to. Earth had thousands of languages. If we wanted to build anything together, we had to learn to talk to each other. We fought wars over misunderstandings. We lost friendships because we couldn't express what we meant. We learned the hard way that communication isn't about perfect understanding. It's about the effort to understand. And now you're teaching us. Now we're learning together, Sarah corrected. Because that's the real gift. Not perfect communication, but the willingness to keep trying when communication is hard. That's what builds real bridges between people. Or species. As Sarah walked through the translation bureau, she saw something that made her heart swell. Aliens from different species, sitting together, teaching each other words from their languages. A Krovan learning Tessari. A Drellian practicing human gestures. A Whisper and a Vrun developing a shared vocabulary. It was messy. It was imperfect. There were misunderstandings and frustrations. But there was also something the translator network had never provided. Connection. Real, hard-won understanding between beings who chose to bridge the gap between them. Sarah had come to the galaxy to help solve a crisis. She'd ended up teaching them something more important. That the best communication isn't perfect. It's honest. And sometimes the journey to understanding is more valuable than instant clarity, the new language of stars. 6 months later. The Galactic Translation Academy stood on a neutral moon, built by a coalition of species who had embraced Sarah's vision. It was beautiful in its diversity. Each wing was designed for different forms of communication. Visual learners. Auditory learners. Those who learned through touch, scent, or electromagnetic pulses. Sarah walked through the central courtyard, watching students from 30 different species practicing together. A young human was teaching a Drellian how to pronounce words with their electromagnetic language converter. A Krovan child and a Tessari youth were creating a hybrid sign language that worked for both their body types. Laughter echoed across species lines. Not perfect laughter. They were still learning what humor meant to each other. But genuine laughter nonetheless. Dr. Chen called Professor Velmora a whisper who had become one of Sarah's closest collaborators. They communicated through a combination of sign language and a device that amplified Velmora's quiet voice. The council wants your report on the first graduating class. Sarah pulled up her data pad. 35 students will graduate next week. Each one fluent in at least 3 alien languages and proficient in emergency communication protocols for 20 more. They'll become the first generation of professional interpreters this galaxy has had in millennia. It's not enough, Velmora said quietly. We need thousands. Tens of thousands. We'll get there, Sarah assured them. Every journey starts with a single step. Or in this case, 35 steps. The resistance. Not everyone was happy with the new system. In the Outer Rim, several species had banded together to search for ancient technology that might restore the translator network. They called themselves the Restoration Coalition and saw Sarah's academy as a betrayal of progress. Their leader, a wealthy Krovan named Draxor, had even offered a massive reward for anyone who could recreate the ancient technology. He appeared on holographic broadcasts, speaking through one of the few remaining translator units that still functioned partially. "Humanity has led us backwards," Draxor proclaimed. "They want us to spend years learning what we once knew instantly. They want our children to struggle with misunderstanding when perfection is possible. This is not progress. This is regression." Sarah watched one of these broadcasts with Vexlar, whose colors had shifted to angry red. "He's gaining support," the administrator said. "Especially among species who had the most difficulty with your system." "I understand their frustration," Sarah replied. "Learning is hard. Especially when you're used to everything being easy. What do? We show them it's worth it." The first crisis. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A diplomatic crisis erupted between the Vrun Collective and the Tessari Federation. A trade dispute had escalated, and without the translator network, both sides were convinced the other was being intentionally insulting. War seemed inevitable. Traditional diplomacy had failed. The few remaining working translators gave conflicting translations, making things worse. Both sides were preparing their militaries when Sarah received an urgent message from the Galactic Council. "Can your students help?" Vexlar asked. Sarah looked at her first graduating class. They were young. Untested. They'd trained for this scenario but never faced it in reality. "I think so. But I need permission to try something unusual." "Anything. We're out of options." Sarah gathered her students. "I need volunteers. This will be dangerous. Not physically, but professionally. If you fail, it could start a war. If you succeed, you'll prove that what we're doing here matters." Every hand went up. Every tentacle, wing, and appendage from every species in the class. Sarah chose 6. 2 humans, 2 Vrun, 2 Tessari. "You're not going as diplomats," she told them. "You're going as bridges. Your job isn't to solve the dispute. It's to make sure both sides actually understand what the other is saying." The negotiation. The negotiation took place on a neutral station. Sarah's students sat between the Vrun and Tessari delegations, translating every word. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But carefully, checking for understanding, clarifying when meanings were unclear, asking questions when concepts didn't translate directly. It was slow. Painfully slow compared to the old translator network. But something amazing happened. As the interpretations took time, both sides started actually listening. They couldn't just react immediately. They had to wait for the translation, and in that waiting, they had time to think. "They're saying your proposal insults their ancestors," one student translated from Tessari. "Ask them why," the Vrun delegate responded. The student did. The answer revealed a cultural misunderstanding. What the Vrun had meant as a generous concession, the Tessari had interpreted as an implication that their ancestors had been foolish. The Vrun had no idea. In their culture, that phrase meant something completely different. "We didn't mean to insult anyone," the Vrun delegate said once they understood. "In our language, we were honoring the wisdom of the past by building on it." The Tessari delegate's posture changed. "Ah. We misunderstood. In our culture, we express that differently. Let us rephrase." Hour by hour, the students bridged gaps that the translator network would have glossed over. They caught nuances. They explained cultural context. They asked questions that helped both sides understand not just words, but meanings. After 2 days, the Vrun and Tessari delegates signed a new trade agreement. But more importantly, they shook hands. Or whatever their species equivalent was. With genuine respect and understanding. The shift. News of the successful negotiation spread quickly. Suddenly, everyone wanted graduates from Sarah's academy. Corporations hired them to facilitate business deals. Families hired them to communicate with alien neighbors. Spaceports needed them to help travelers from different species. Draxor's restoration coalition lost momentum. Why search for ancient technology when human-trained interpreters could solve communication problems right now? The system wasn't perfect, but it worked. And it was getting better every day. "You've won," Dexlar told Sarah one evening. His colors were peaceful blue. "The galaxy is embracing your vision." "It's not my vision," Sarah corrected. "It's humanity's legacy. We learned how to bridge language barriers because we had to. Now we're just sharing what we learned." "But you're not done, are you?" Sarah smiled. "No. This is just the beginning. The next generation." Over the next year, 50 more translation academies opened across the galaxy. Each one adapted Sarah's methods for local species and cultures. Enrollment exploded. Young beings from every species wanted to become interpreters, to be the ones who helped others understand each other. But Sarah noticed something even more important. Children were growing up learning multiple languages from the start. A generation was emerging that could speak to species their parents had only understood through translators. They were making friends across species lines, creating art together, falling in love, building families. "This is what I hoped for," Sarah told Velmora as they watched a group of multi-species children playing in the academy courtyard. Not just professional interpreters. A whole generation that sees language learning as normal. As something you do to connect with others. Delmora made a sound that Sarah had learned was whisper laughter. "You know what's funny? The translator network made communication effortless. But it also made it meaningless. When understanding is instant, you don't value it. Now that people have to work for it, they appreciate it more. And they understand better," Sarah added. "Because they're not just hearing words. They're learning contexts. Cultures. Ways of thinking. When you learn someone's language, you learn how they see the world." The discovery. 2 years after the translator network failed completely, a Vrona archaeologist made an exciting discovery. In an ancient ruin, they found what appeared to be a message. It took a team of interpreters 6 months to translate it properly. It was written in a proto-language that predated the translator network. The message was simple: "To those who come after, we give you this gift of understanding. Use it well. But know that it is temporary. When it fails, as all things must, you will face a choice. You can search for a replacement, or you can learn to understand each other without crutches. The second path is harder. It is also better. For in learning each other's words, you learn each other's hearts. That is the greatest translation of all." When Sarah read the translated message, she laughed. They knew. The ancients knew the network would fail. They built it that way. "Why?" Dexlar asked. "Because they understood something important. Real communication isn't about perfect understanding. It's about the effort to understand. They gave us centuries of easy communication so we could build this civilization. But they always intended for us to eventually learn to communicate on our own." "So it was a test?" "No," Sarah said. "A gift. They gave us time to grow as a civilization. Now they're trusting us to take the next step." The legacy. 5 years after the translator network failed, Sarah retired from the Galactic Translation Academy. She'd trained thousands of interpreters and inspired millions to learn new languages. She was ready to go home to Earth. But on her last day, something unexpected happened. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy came to honor her. They presented her with gifts, each one expressing gratitude in their own language. And Sarah understood them all. Not perfectly. But enough. "You gave us more than a way to communicate," Dexlar said. His colors were brilliant gold. "You gave us a reason to care about understanding each other. That's more valuable than any technology." Sarah looked out at the crowd. Beings from 100 different worlds, speaking in dozens of languages, understanding each other not through ancient magic but through hard-won learning. It was messy. It was imperfect. But it was real. I didn't do this alone, Sarah said. Every person here chose to bridge the language gap. Chose to learn. Chose to understand. That's what makes it work. Not my system. Your choice. As her ship left the station, Sarah watched the galaxy through the viewport. Somewhere down there, students were learning their first alien words. Diplomats were working through complex negotiations with careful translations. Children were making friends across species lines, creating a future where communication barriers seemed as strange as the ancient translators themselves. The translator network had given the galaxy instant understanding. Sarah had given them something better. The tools and motivation to understand each other for real. Not perfectly. But honestly. And in a galaxy of infinite diversity, that honest effort to understand was the most precious gift of all. Humanity had brought more than technology to the stars. They'd brought the hard-won wisdom of a species that had learned to communicate across every barrier Earth could create. They'd taught the galaxy that perfect communication wasn't as important as genuine understanding. That the journey to comprehension was more valuable than instant clarity. And in doing so, they'd helped build a civilization that was stronger, closer, and more united than any ancient technology could have achieved. Because in the end, the best translation wasn't words to words. It was heart to heart. And that was a language everyone could learn.